Chapter 856. Meeting Change. The news of the level limit update didn't send the pro circle into a panic, but also didn't ignite a wave of excitement like it did with the normal players. The pro players still continued with their business as usual. However, the other departments of the clubs had to work a lot harder. For logistics, they had already begun to start taking inventory of their rare materials. Since all their silver equipment had to be upgraded, taking them to unknown heights, the consumption of materials could instantly deplete the stockpiles that they had been building up for years. The guilds of their respective clubs also put more time and effort into team dungeons. Though this last-minute effort might not be of much help, it was a matter of attitude that showed their boss just how much everyone cared. Dungeon materials were easy to guarantee, it was the rare materials from wild bosses that were hard. Especially in the heavenly domain, it had come to the point where the big guilds didn't seem to care any longer about their usual order and mustered all of their members to show how serious they could be. At this moment, it was a matter of headcount and the grounds were filled with corpses. Yi Shu and his alliance were less successful under such circumstances. It was far too chaotic and lacking in method. The competitiveness of the big guilds were getting absurd and all they had in mind was one word: charge. Charging recklessly all over the place, no one was certain how the bosses even managed to fall into one guild's hands or another. This chaos continued for a week. It was probably because the guild leaders felt that they had done their part in this act, and decided to restore order. Rare materials were very valuable, but after so many years it wasn't possible to not have stockpiled any. In reality, everyone knew that what really would influence the bigger picture was going to be the new level 75 dungeons and wild bosses. The level 75 materials that would come from these sources were the real deciders. And for these new dungeons and bosses, they had to first figure out how to beat them before they could even think about planning on how to snatch them. What sort of chaos would the release of the information on these bosses and dungeons lead to? It was something everyone could imagine. Even Esports Home Weekly had decided to focus on publishing articles on the release of the information. Of course, they analyzed it according to how it might possibly affect the pro scene. As for the specifics, they were being slowly leaked to the public through official channels. First, they announced that the normal servers and heavenly domain would all be expanded. There would be 6 more areas in each server. These 6 areas would, without doubt, become the most active areas for players for the following year. 6 areas naturally meant at least 6 new dungeons and 6 new wild bosses. So far, the Glory Company had leaked the specifics of 1 area each for the Heavenly Domain and normal servers. Of course, the Heavenly Domains area caught the most attention. Barrier Mountains. That was the name of the level 75 area announced for the Heavenly Domain, appearing in the northmost section. Among these endless mountains that seemed to form a barrier, was the main city of this area, Thousand Peak City. Thousand Peak City wasn't particularly large in area, but it was a crucial point in the defense of the mountains. Now, there were a pile of problems, both internal and external, awaiting a warrior to solve them or something similar. This sort of background was a must-have in the game, but it wasn't something the pro circle would bother to care about knowing. In the pro circle, they paid attention to the other information released about Barrier Mountains. In the Barrier Mountains, there would be 2 small 5-player dungeons, a 10-player dungeon, a 20-player dungeon and a 100-player dungeon. Shadow Tactician Sandy was the wild boss of the Barrier Mountains, crafted from the storyline and background. Of course, the story behind the boss wasn't something the pro circle cared about. What they cared about for Sandy was what class it was, what skills it had, what it would do at Red Blood, and what good stuff you could get from killing it. This information wasn't leaked yet. All they received was a 1 and 47-second long video that showed how powerful Shadow Tactician Sandy was. The 1 minute and 47-second video was researched over and over again by the powerhouses. They came to the conclusion that Sandy was a Nightwalker, and the skills Sandy used in the demonstration spanned across the Warlock, Ninja, and Assassin classes. The wild boss was immensely powerful, but that wasn't what normal players would pay attention to. Those who had experience in Glory knew that such a difficult challenger was beyond normal players already. It was something for the big clubs. What the players cared about was things like dungeons that they could experience for themselves. The background stories that the pro circle didn't bother with was something the players enjoyed. Not long after the information was leaked, people had already started making comments on the story. Some were lamentful, some were shocked, and some had already started writing fanfictions. The game, of course, cooperated with all the publicity, launching all sorts of offline events to interact with players. Suddenly, the entire Glory Circle was bustling with activity, celebrating the long-awaited update. The high-end Pro Circle suddenly seemed more like onlookers. The normal players were excitedly celebrating, while they were busy making preparations to try and grasp future victories. Club Excellent Era. As soon as the announcements were made, Kui Lee, Chen Yahui, and the others were all elated. Like how Wei Chen realized this was a terrible situation for Happy, they realized that this was another insurance bolt for Excellent Era. Kui Lee didn't waste any time in calling a meeting with all of the department heads. Of course, that nonsense about preparing for the release of information on bosses and dungeons had to talked about. After that, he directed his words to Chen Yahui's guild department, telling them to muster their people, and prepare for the new dungeons and bosses. As Kui Lee spoke to Chen Yahui, his gaze was very meaningful. Chen Yahui and him were old partners and knew each other very well. With Kui Lee's speech concluded, he immediately started speaking, first speaking for his own department before beginning to analyze their current situation. I think this is a very big opportunity for Excellent Era, Chen Yahui said. Although we're in the Challenger League, I trust that none of us present have limited their sights to a barren land like the Challenger League. Tyranny, Blue Rain, Tiny Herb, Samsara. Although we might not be on the same stage as them this season, they are our true rivals and always have been. However, this season, they not only have the pro matches to worry about, but also the upcoming information on the new update, so they'll be feeling a lot more pressure than we will. In comparison, being in the Challenger League means that we have more time to expend our efforts on researching the new information. We can take this chance to make preparations for our return to the Alliance next season, and overwhelm them. This opportunity is like a blessing in disguise. Though valuable, I trust that no one is willing to try and recreate it. So, I think that everyone should put in their best efforts and see how much we can improve with this opportunity. Chen Yahui said this mildly, but as he spoke, his gaze often shifted to the captain and vice-captain, Sun Shang and Chao Shiking, sitting opposite him. Everyone present was a higher-up in the club, a core member, so they weren't dumb. Seeing where Chen Yahui's gaze kept falling and hearing his words, they instantly understood. This guy wanted the pro players to help out in-game. They were in the Challengers League this season, but in these departments it was business as usual. Only the team, despite still having one match per week, felt like they were on holiday. Since all their opponents were insignificant, they didn't have to give it their all. In the Pro League, pro players wouldn't go into the game at all, afraid of messing up their mood and rhythm, which might affect their match performance. However, since Excellent Era was in the Challengers League, they didn't have to worry about all that. It was just that this wasn't a part of their responsibilities, so the club couldn't force them to help out. So, Chen Yahui could only hint at it in his speech like this and hope that the two captains would understand and willingly take up his suggestions. Everyone's gaze turned to the two. Kui Lee, seeing this, made it clear that it was their turn to speak. The team should also put effort into preparing for the update. Seeing this, Captain Sun Shang realized it was his turn to speak. He cleared his throat. That's true. The new information released will be followed by new level limits, changing the stats and skills of our characters. If we were in the league, we would have to figure it out as we compete, so there will inevitably be some things they can't cover while focusing on the match. We, on the other hand, have the chance to carefully research and test it. It's just a little unfortunate that our opponents in the Challenger League are too weak to be lab rats. We will need to watch more professional matches to figure things out. Sun Shang looked lamentful as he finished, but the other heads in the room all felt as if there were black lines on their faces. This guy really is a newbie. He completely misunderstood what the manager and Chen Yahui were trying to imply. He was even seriously analyzing how the team could prepare for the new update. Though your analysis was rather good, unfortunately, you're way off topic. Everyone could see that when Sun Shang ended his little monologue with triumph, Chao Shiking, who was next to him, revealed a little of his awkwardness in his expression. It was clear that he had figured out what the club wanted the pro players to do. It was unfortunate that Sun Shang didn't get it at all, getting off topic in all seriousness. Now, he had to go and fix this blunder. This sort of captain wasn't even as good as Joe Zakai, who only ever expressed his thoughts with ah, oh. Quote. Xiao Shiking was, after all, an experienced veteran, so he didn't fuss about having to make up for this blunder, immediately adding, if it's just through the Challenger League, then we really can't do much and there aren't many chances anyways. I think we can find other places to help us test our strength. Oh, you mean to organize invitationals with other teams? But we're in the middle of the season, would they even accept? Sun Shang said. There's really no saving you. Xiao Shiking was instantly speechless. Chapter 857. Charging Up. On stage, Sun Shang was undoubtedly a god. No one would argue against that. However, outside of the stage, Sun Shang made everyone feel embarrassed again and again. Although his words weren't necessarily wrong, they were very ill-timed. His thoughts were on a completely different track than what was going around the table. Sun Jiang's behavior suited his age. What could they do though? The responsibilities that came with his position needed him to be mature. Unfortunately, while Sun Jiang's skill and glory was constantly improving, his growth outside of the game over the past 2 years in the pro scene was disappointing. He didn't understand what Chen Yahui was hinting at. Xiao Shikin once again reduced the scope, but he still didn't understand what they were hinting at. After he raised the topic of an invitational, everyone in the room was speechless. However, this guy actually looked quite pleased with himself. He felt like he had accurately pointed out the problem, leaving no room for doubt. It would be very difficult to invite any high-level opponents for an invitational during this point in the season. Kui Li had no choice but to speak up at this moment. The update is about to be released though. In order to obtain the new resources, the environment in the game will certainly be abnormally intense. It might even be a perfect smelting furnace, a place where we can try out the new skills and new equipment. Chen Yahui didn't beat around the bush this time. Test equipment in the game? Is that okay? Sun Shang was doubtful. Chen Yahui really wanted to slap himself. He had blurted out new equipment without thinking. In reality, they definitely wouldn't be able to test their new equipment in the game. The game was a very dangerous place. If one of the pieces of equipment dropped on accident, who would be held responsible? Sun Shang clearly recognized this issue. As a result, he only looked at the surface and didn't understand the purpose of those words, so he immediately grabbed Chen Yahui's slip of the tongue and raised an objection. New equipment doesn't necessarily mean silver equipment. At this moment, Xiao Shikin quickly made up for the mistake. In terms of theory, it appeared true, but was actually false. It still made it seem ambiguous though. Everyone looked at Sun Shang. What was their captain thinking now? Could you please have a bit of depth to your thoughts? If not, today all we'll be doing is attempting to instruct you, and you won't even graduate at the end. Sure enough, after what appeared to be a moment of serious thinking, he spoke with a bit of hesitation. In the game. And then, there was no after. Sun Shang stopped here. Everyone wanted to pull out their hair. Bro, what are you even asking? Kui Li couldn't bear it anymore. He directly stated his intentions. That makes a lot of sense. We're not having any trouble in the Challenger League. If it doesn't interfere with practice, having you guys go into the game and familiarize yourself with the new update is a good suggestion. We have ample time to prepare for next season. From this point of view, we have the advantage over any other team in the alliance. Although Kui Li had completely revealed the main point of their conversation here, he still covered up a few things. If Sun Shang still didn't understand, then he was way too stupid. Sun Shang didn't understand what was being implied in the beginning, but he seemed to understand their words now. This time, he didn't say anything. Sun Shang had a shadow in his heart. It wasn't like he had never run to the game to be a helper, but what had been the result? He led Team Excellent Era's main roster to fight against some randoms led by Yi Chu and lost. It had been a miserable defeat too. Sun Shang wouldn't admit that he was above that, but now that someone once again hoped he could go to help out in the game, he couldn't help but think about it more carefully. Everyone in the room waited for him to make his decision. Finally, Sun Shang nodded his head slightly. That's reasonable. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Kui Li immediately seized this chance to speak up. He didn't look for Sun Shang, but Xiao Shikin instead. Vice Captain, keep an eye out from the sidelines and keep in touch with the guild department. If there's a suitable opportunity, please bring everyone together to the game to practice. Okay, Xiao Shikin nodded his head. He completely understood Kui Li's intentions. Familiarizing themselves with the new release had been established as the reason. However, these few knew that the end goal was to borrow the pro players and rise during this period of time. Of course, the purpose was to strengthen the team. In addition, the Challenger League wasn't as stressful for the players, so Xiao Shikan didn't have any objections to this arrangement. After this topic, the other departments stated how they would face this new release. The meeting ended shortly afterwards. The various teams were also holding similar meetings. Happy also needed to discuss their plans for the release. The battle against us is about to officially begin. Yi Shu started the meeting with these words. As the various teams actively made their preparations, the last week of November passed. The first match of the 6th round of the Challenger League had just ended. Happy had yet to encounter Excellent Era and easily defeated this week's opponent. In the Pro Alliance, the rankings hadn't changed much after the 13th round. However, everyone knew that this would be their final moments of peace. For their future matches in December, they would need to face the new Glory update. The Pro Alliance would pause for 1 week. In the second week, on 12/14, the 14th round would start and the effects of the new update would appear in the pro scene. 12/3 was Glory's anniversary. The contents of the update had already been publicly released. As soon as the clock hit midnight on 12/3, the new update would be released and Glory's 11th server would open. Including today, there were 11 days until the match on the 14th. During these 11 days, the various teams would first force all of their characters to level 75 before anything else. If there was a character level difference in the match on the 14th, it would definitely be a deciding factor. How many levels they could get during these 11 days depended on each team's leveling methods, but at this point, getting even a 1-level difference wouldn't be easy. Apart from that, during these 11 days, the club guilds would work hard to find ways to improve their team's strength through the new content. Perhaps some level 75 orange equipment would be better than their level 70 silver equipment. The company didn't release any information on the newly released equipment. The players had to find out for themselves. During this period of time, the company only announced the new level 75 areas in the normal server and Heavenly Domain. In the Heavenly Domain, there was also New Weir Peninsula and Weaving Silver Lake. New Weir Peninsula was located on the east side of the Heavenly Domain's mainland. It was a peninsula that extended from the original coastline. The background for it was a place where pirates engaged in battle. The main city in New Weir Peninsula was called New Weir City. In the area was a 5-player dungeon, a 50-player dungeon, and a 100-player raid. The wild boss was called Ruila, Daughter of the Sea. The other new area, Weaving Silver Lake, took a part out of 3 other areas in the Heavenly Domain to form a new section of the map. Weaving Silver Lake was the smallest of the 6 new areas. This lake, which suddenly popped out of nowhere, naturally had a mysterious story behind it. As before, no one in the pro scene cared for it. Weaving Silver Lake only had a 5-player dungeon and 2 20-player dungeons. The wild boss was Silver Lake Guardian Frederica. Even though there wasn't much information released on her, in the pictures of Silver Lake Guardian Frederica, it was very easy to deduce the boss's class, Gunner. That was all the information that had been given. Even the pro clubs had no way of making too many preparations based on this info. Everyone could only keep a close eye on the calendar and wait for the update to drop. At 10 p.m. on 12/2, Glory's servers temporarily shut down to prepare for the update. However, this didn't affect the excitement of the players. Happy Internet Cafe was packed with people. The majority of them had even reserved their seats for an overnight stay. As for the clubs, the pro players had to restrain themselves from their curiosity and had to rest. All of the pro player account cards had been collected by the club and then given to the guild department for the employees to level up. These powerful characters appeared very ordinary because the self-made equipment created for them had been replaced with temporary equipment. The guilds had already arranged for guard teams to protect the levels of these pro characters. This sort of protection was necessary. It was rare for pro characters to appear in the game, let alone regular players crowding around them. If the players surrounded and started attack them, it would be very troublesome. The pro characters that had logged onto the game to level up would not only not gain levels, but lose levels instead. When match time came, they might as well not even appear on stage. Happy didn't have the same conditions as those clubs, who had people appointed to leveling these characters. Their characters had to be leveled up on their own. In light of the amount of hostility towards them in Glory, their safety was also an issue that had to be considered. Their characters had been escorted by their guild troops to the northern parts of the Heavenly Domain mainland ahead of time. The update notes had stated that Barrier Mountains would be merged into the Heavenly Domain over here. When midnight struck, Yi Shu's group would appear here and head directly into the Barrier Mountains. Yi Shu's intent was to directly enter the dungeons. This was an undoubtedly bold move. In the new area, although the monsters in the leveling areas were between level 71 and level 75, every monster in the dungeon was level 75. It was supposed to be for max-leveled players to challenge, but for Happy, in order to have an environment safe from other players, they decided to try this 5-level higher dungeon. The Heavenly Domain consisted of players from all 10 servers. It could be imagined just how much more pressure there was in these 6 Heavenly Domain areas than in the normal servers. It was also why the Heavenly Domain was so vast. Heavenly Domain areas were much larger than normal server areas. These 6 new areas were no exception. Chapter 858. Sealed Mountain Thieves Hideout. December 3rd, at midnight 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds, Glory timely released the new content. Tens of millions of players fought to log in at that exact moment. Even though it wasn't a weekend, the loyal players wanted to start exploring as soon as possible. Every account's friend list was now lit up more than ever before. The quality of the Glory servers that they took pride in weren't famous for nothing. Even with so much traffic, it was still running as usual. However, while the servers might be enough, the space in the maps in-game weren't. As soon as the new content was released, all the level 70 players, no matter if they had only gotten there or had long since hit the limit, flooded into the new areas. So what if there were only 6 new areas? There still wasn't enough space for the players. Especially the 3 areas that were first announced, even more players wanted to check them out. Yi Shu and Ko had last logged out with their characters prepared to enter the new areas. Even so, all they could see were people when they logged in. It seemed that a lot of people had parked their characters before logging off. Yi Shu and others then realized that, at this special time, there was no need to worry about their characters' safety. The players had never been so eager to talk with NPCs, why would they bother with peeking? That was a waste of precious time. This was a rare chance where everyone had been pulled back to the same starting point, so none of them wanted to lose before the race even began. The crowd flooded into the new maps. Under these circumstances, doing quests and killing monsters was an extravagant luxury to have. So, many players realized that at a time like this, the only way to separate yourself from the crowd and get your own quiet space to practice was to run dungeons. Unfortunately, the dungeons were all level 75. With a whole 5 levels of difference, normal players wouldn't be able to handle it. However, no one cared about that now. If they went to experience the dungeon, then that was rather worthwhile, wasn't it? As for the big guilds, they immediately ran to beat the dungeons. New dungeons meant that there were chances to get first kills, and dungeon first kills, as well as records, gave out rewards that were as good as those obtained from wild bosses. With the 3-year pause at level 70, all the records were broken to the point of being unbreakable. With the new dungeons, the long unseen race for first kills and dungeon records was once again revived. With Happy, Lord Grim, Windward Formation, Steam Bun Invasion, 1-Inch Ash, Chasing Haze, Dawn Rifle, Little Cold Hands, Concealed Light, and the Battle Mage Forest Landscape, who had turned on Excellent Era for Happy with Chen Guo and became a core member of Guild Happy, made a perfect 10. Mo Fan had been hanging around Happy for 3 months now, but was still like a stranger, using free food and board but still didn't greet anyone. However, with the new update released, he was pushed to be a part of their pioneering team. In the end, he didn't reject Yi Shu's summons and quietly joined their party. Yi Shu was skilled and brave. With this 10-person party, he headed directly for the officially announced 10-person dungeon in Barrier Mountains, Sealed Mountain Thieves Hideout. In the background story of Barrier Mountains, the Sealed Mountain Thieves were a group of criminals that caused chaos across the Barrier Mountains. The rebellion happening in Thousand Peak City was partly thanks to the rebels allying themselves with the Sealed Mountain Thieves. So, in completing the storylines in Barrier Mountains, there would naturally be an event where players would have to destroy the Sealed Mountain Thieves. Apart from running around the map and fighting as part of the plot, the harder quests would all be completed through dungeons. But anyone who was at this part of the storyline was probably not far from level 75. Yi Shu and the others weren't heading for the dungeons to complete any quests, they were going for the experience points and hopefully a first kill. The location of the dungeons had long since been leaked. After the update, it could be easily seen on the map. Heading over, the entire place was already filled with players. There were no monsters whatsoever in the barrier mountains because it didn't take more than a few seconds after they respawned for them to go extinct. Many of the players were just like headless flies, wanting to do something, but not being able to find anything to do. The quest NPCs were completely surrounded and it didn't seem to be possible to speak to one without waiting for upwards of an hour. Among the mountains, there were more players than monsters, so many people started to explore in an attempt to find a place with less people. As for those who headed directly for the dungeons, it wasn't just the big guilds, there were plenty of normal players as well. They would find a few friends, make a party, and start exploring the dungeons. But wanting to explore level 75 dungeons at level 70 was a courageous move to make, especially a 10-person one. When Yi Shu and the others arrived at the entrance to Sealed Mountain Thieves' hideout, they saw many people already outside. Clicking into their profiles, the stats were all red. Yi Shu and co had rushed to the dungeon as soon as possible, but by then there had already been many teams who had been wiped out and respawned already. What sort of efficiency was this? There were plenty of sightseeing parties at the entrance. In reality, everyone knew that for new dungeons, even groups formed of friends, let alone random wild groups, had to struggle and research them for a while before they could even have a chance of getting through. So that's why no one said they were here to run dungeons, but just to sightsee. Yi Shu and co didn't dawdle, going inside as soon as they reached the entrance. After being transported inside, the scenery didn't change much. They had only moved through the entrance. It looked like they were still in the Barrier Mountains map, but actually they were in an isolated space already. In the areas around the entrance, there would be a safe space where you couldn't be attacked. As soon as the 10 of them entered, they started looking at the situation of the dungeon and quickly found that at each side of the door to the hideout stood a tall watchtower. Each watchtower had a sealed mountain thief, holding a rifle and watching from afar. Should we blast them down? Chen Guo asked, already controlling Chasing Haze to heft her rocket launcher onto her shoulder. Be patient, let's observe for a moment. We're not here for speed, just to get through the dungeon safely, Yi Shu said. In a completely unknown dungeon with a 5-level suppression, they couldn't be too careless, even if they were fighting for a first kill. Under these circumstances, getting through the dungeon was already a win. A patrol is coming. At that moment, Wei Chen spoke up. Everyone looked forwards and saw a 5-man patrol coming their way under the lead of a small ringleader, holding steel knives. Can we avoid the patrol? Wei Chen's windward formation shifted back by 2 steps. He couldn't move any further, or else he'd exit the dungeon. Who knows? Yi Shu, of course, didn't know either. Who knew how close the patrol would get to them? Prepare for battle. I just want to ask, and when Yi hurriedly spoke up, who's the MT? Me. Just as Yi Shu said this, he noticed Luo Ji's concealed light already summoning creatures, clearly because of Yi Shu's order to prepare for battle. Yi Shu hastily gave him an order, concealed light, limit your summons to 4 or less. Ah, Luo Ji startled. If you don't exert good control over them, you might accidentally pull more mobs, Yi Shu said. Luo Ji went red, but he knew it was the truth. With his skill, pulling out at all stops would just be too chaotic for him and a mistake could release a summon from his control. 4 summons was the most he could exert flawless control over. Luo Ji knew it wasn't time to be prideful, so he obediently summoned 4. The patrol came closer and closer, as if they really were going to walk straight to the entrance of the hideout. Let's snatch the initiative. Chen Guo couldn't stay calm any longer. Don't panic, Yi Shu was still very calm. If we enter their aggro range, Chasing Haze shoot the left thief down, and Dawn Rifle go for the right. Okay, the 2 replied together. Everyone, be careful, Yi Shu quickly said, seeing the patrol come closer and closer. Though these were new monsters from a level 75 dungeon, he could still estimate the aggro range from experience. Fuck, it's just a wave of normal monsters, don't make the atmosphere so nervous, Wei Chen said. You're nervous just from a group of normal monsters? How strange, Yi Shu mocked. I'm just worried you'll make the other youngsters nervous, Wei Chen said. Haha, the youngsters nowadays are stronger than you, Yi Shu was, of course, hinting at his junior in Blue Rain, Lu Hanwen. Can you two shut up? Chen Guo yelled. She was the only one who was truly nervous. In the end, just as her words fell, the patrol turned and left without entering aggro range. A false alarm, Yi Shu said. Once they're far enough, shoot those two down, Wei Chen said. So everyone watched as the patrol gradually walked further away, eventually turning at a crossroads and leaving their sight. It had already been over a minute since they started the dungeon, and all they had really done was pose and look around. This showed what caution was necessary for exploring a place levels above you. Okay, fire. Finally, the battle began. At Yi Shu's orders, with chasing haze on the left, and Dawn rifle on the right, the rocket launchers on their shoulders opened fire, missiles heading straight for the watchtowers. The smoke from the explosions hadn't even dispersed when they heard the two NPCs start to yell, "Intruders! Intruders!" In an instant, the patrol that had disappeared around the corner flew right back. So it's like that. Seems like we should have assassinated them first, Yi Shu wondered aloud. As for Chen Guo, she had long since started panicking, asking Yi Shu, "Where do I shoot? Where do I shoot?" Tang Ru was far more ferocious. Seeing that the commotion had already begun, she had already charged forth to meet them. "Slow down, soft mist," Yi Shu hurriedly shouted. "We'll kill them here. If we charge forwards, we don't know if we might pull other monsters or not." Yi Shu was experienced, after all. Hearing this, Tang Ru had soft mist stop her charge. The two sealed mountain thieves that had been shot at, were knocked down by the blast and were currently not a threat. The patrol of thieves running over had two gunner class members that raised their weapons and started shooting. Bang bang. Two gunshots rang out, but the victims weren't chasing haze and Dawn rifle. This patrol's aggro is quite unusual. Saying this, Yi Shu knew it was time for him to step up to do his job as the mount. Chapter 859. Aggro Chain. Yi Shu's Lord Grimm led the way forward, but the patrol team had two long-range gunners, so they wouldn't run to the front to attack. Yi Shu had just stopped Soft Mist from running too far. Naturally, he did the same too. As a result, the two gunners were difficult to control. At this distance, only a Chi Master's cloud-grasping fist could pull them over. Team Happy didn't have this class. It was a skill that could only be learned after class advancement. The unspecialized Lord Grimm and the brawler Steam Bun Invasion couldn't learn it. In this situation, other skill effects needed to be used in order to get the desired effects. Yi Shu's Lord Grimm jumped high into the air and lobbed a grenade. The grenade arced down behind those two gunners. Boom! Dust clouds rose from the explosion. The two gunners were thrown forward. At the same time, Lord Grimm forced his way back down with a falling light blade. The other three dagger-wielding sealed mountain thieves ate dirt from the blast too. Yi Shu was pleased with the NPC's courage. A normal player would have easily dodged the grenade thrown out from such a far distance. Only NPCs would so stupidly ignore the attack and fast-tank the damage. No matter the level gap, NPCs' fundamental patterns never changed. Only advanced NPCs, otherwise known as bosses, would pay attention to avoiding damage. The grenade pushed the two gunners closer, but the power of the skill was still fairly weak. At this moment, a missile descended from the sky and landed behind the two sealed mountain thief gunners. Boom! This time, the shockwave's AoE was far more powerful than the grenades. The mushroom cloud shot up into the sky. If that still didn't push the two gunners in front of Lord Grimm, it would be an outrage to the visual effects. Beautiful. Amidst the chaos, the MT didn't forget to give a big thumbs up behind him to whoever did that. Chen Guo felt jealous. If only she had that kind of skill. Unfortunately, she didn't have the ability to guide the heat-seeking missile to the desired location in such a short amount of time. It was Team Happy's newest member, Wu Chen, who had shot the missile. Wu Chen's skill level couldn't be considered top tier in the pro scene, but his fundamentals were still solid. What Chen Guo liked was that when this brother came, he didn't hurry to discuss about wages and whatnot. He was like the others and just got by with what they had. What a great helper. Chen Guo couldn't help but think at this moment. First look at the target I'm attacking. Don't aggro enemies randomly, Yi Shu shouted. After all, his unspecialized character wasn't a knight. He didn't have the stats to hold too many enemies. His main method of pulling monsters was through damage. As a result, the level of coordination necessary to make this work was fairly high. If the DPS classes only cared about themselves, the aggro would quickly turn into a mess. Of the people here, he obviously didn't need to worry about Wei Chen, Chao Yifan, or Wu Chen. Steamed Bun and Tang Ru had played with Yi Shu for a long time now, so they were familiar with Lord Grimm's MT style. They wouldn't make simple mistakes. As for Little Cold Hands, he wouldn't be healing the monsters. Apart from them was Chen Guo, Luo Ji, and Mo Fan. Chen Guo had experience and knew her skills well. She knew that with her skill level among this team, let alone helping them, it would be good as long as she wasn't a burden. In a chaotic situation like this, she might as well not do anything, so she wouldn't mess anything up. That side had turned into a mess. For a moment, she had no way of having Chasing Haze accurately attack the correct target, so she simply did nothing and acted as a spectator. As for Luo Ji, if he did his usual summon of everything at once, the team's killer would certainly be him. Fortunately, Yi Shu had reminded him, so he only summoned 4 creatures, which Luo Ji could adequately control. As a result, the person who could be a problem would be Mo Fan. This guy actually used a high-level ninja skill, Shadow Dance. This skill was always used as a group attack. Once this attack came out, wouldn't he be the one generating the most aggro? Chen Guo became anxious when she saw this scene. She jumped out and yelled, "What are you doing?" Outside of the game, Chen Guo was already glaring at Mo Fan. She could endure Mo Fan's usual behavior because, even though he hadn't helped them at all, he wasn't a burden either. Chen Guo wouldn't mind his trivial matters like eating and living here every day. She knew Yi Shu's intentions were to have him slowly get involved in this lifestyle, so Mo Fan would wholeheartedly want to join, but in this crucial moment, Mo Fan actually didn't listen to orders and acted on his own. It crossed the line for Chen Guo. "Calm down," Mo Fan ignored her, but Yi Shu's voice came. "This guy?" "It's fine," Yi Shu interrupted Chen Guo and told her to take a look at the screen. Chen Guo glanced at it and was stunned. After Mo Fan's deception used Shadow Dance, clones were scattered all over the place. The aggro wasn't messed up though, because his Shadow Dance had been controlled very well. His attack target was still the one that everyone was focusing on. He wasn't attacking anywhere he wanted to, like Chen Guo had originally thought. This guy, Chen Guo knew she had blamed Mo Fan wrongly, but that guy completely ignored her. Apologizing to him was pointless. But after sitting down again, Chen Guo still mumbled as if she were talking to Yi Shu, "I blamed him wrongly." "That's not entirely true. He wants to mess things up," Yi Shu said. "What?" "He wants to take the aggro away from me," Yi Shu said indifferently. Through the in-game voice comms, everyone could hear his words. "Don't mess around," Wei Chen was very displeased. "Haha, if you want to mess things up, you'd better try harder," Yi Shu said. His hands continued to move. Chen Guo stole a glance at Mo Fan. His expression was very serious. This punk probably still harbored resentment against Yi Shu. If he could steal away the aggro, it would mean that he was superior to Yi Shu. As for the chaos that followed, he probably didn't care. Did he have any sense of teamwork in his heart? In any case, Chen Guo didn't get involved, so she didn't make any mistakes. Yi Shu took Lord Grimm and assumed the MT role. It wasn't an easy task. A 5-level difference meant that his skill effects wouldn't be completely effective. In addition, he pulled 7 monsters at once. There was no way he wouldn't handle all of damage. In a 10-player dungeon, when pulling so many monsters, the main tank and secondary tank usually acted together. Right now, not only was Lord Grimm not a tank class, Yi Shu could only rely himself. "Don't just focus on attacking. Pay attention to the patterns of these sealed mountain thieves," Yi Shu reminded everyone. There could only be so many different types of dungeon NPCs, which appeared again and again. As a result, the first wave was considered the most difficult because only this battle would be completely unknown. After his first battle, they would start accumulating knowledge on the new dungeon monsters and their progress through the dungeon would become smoother. The battle with these 7 sealed mountain thieves lasted 3 minutes long. After Yi Shu took control of the pace, the old veteran Wei Chen didn't need to strictly follow the arrangements. He started displaying a playstyle that suited him much better, thus decreasing the pressure on the team. In the end, the first wave ended smoothly. They were just minions. There wasn't much suspense to it at all. After a bit of adjustment, the team followed the path to the stronghold and continued forward. At the same time, those guild teams, friend groups, or just random passerbyers were having trouble with these 7 aggro-linked monsters at the entrance. It wasn't so tragic that all of them wiped out, but getting past this part without any casualties like Team Happy did was truly a bit difficult for these players. Take Blue Brook Guild. Their guild's most elite members were personally led by Chen Yahui to start this dungeon. There was a suppression of 5 levels. Starting with a 10-player dungeon was the limit. Attempting a dungeon that required more people would be underestimating the game too much. 100-player dungeons didn't even need to be mentioned. Even now, those top guilds didn't dare claim that they could get through the level 71s with certainty. 100 players going in and 90 players coming out was already an impressive achievement. Facing these 7 level 75 dungeon monsters were the 5 great experts of Blue Brook Guild. It took the sacrifice of 2 of their members to eliminate these 7 monsters. How difficult. After the battle ended, chilling nightfall had lingering fears. We probably won't be able to clear it, will we? Flying Brushstroke said. Clear it? If the rest is like this too, it's hard to say if we'll even make it to the boss, Chilling Nightfall said. Let's just take a look around. Flying Brushstroke was gloomy. These 2 great experts of Blue Brook Guild had already lost the will to continue fighting. Of course, they couldn't be blamed. They had already been mentally prepared for this outcome in a 10-player dungeon 5 levels above them. However, they had thought that they would be killed by the boss. They didn't think these little monsters would be an issue. Who would have thought that 2 of their guys would die after the opening battle? Probably only pro players can pass through this 10-player dungeon right now, Chilling Nightfall said. There shouldn't be any pro players on at this time, Flying Brushstroke said. Although they could see that in their Blue Brook Guild, whether it was Swaksar or Troubling Rain or Flowing Cloud or Soul Speaker or any of the other pro characters, all of them were online. However, they knew that these characters weren't being played by the pro players. The account cards had been handed to the guild department. During this period of time, they were being power leveled 24/7. At this moment, they sought after the fastest leveling speed. Coming to the new areas to level wouldn't be a smart move. These Team Blue Rain characters were at the known areas, clearing level 70 dungeons to level instead. These characters were level 70. The people leveling these characters had experience with level 70 dungeons, which was why, in order to pursue the fastest leveling speed, this was the best method. Each and every character on a pro team was leveling in the level 70 dungeons. During these 11 days, they would utilize the fastest leveling method to level up before doing anything else. There probably won't be a first clear tonight, right? Right when Chilling Nightfall finished these words, a guy popped up in Blue River's mind. Is he leveling or clearing dungeons right now? Chapter 860. Vanguard Brother Wolf. The people Blue River was thinking of were naturally Yishu and Happy. However, even though he knew that the other was very skilled at running dungeons, he had no way of causing any trouble for them. Blue River decided to not bring this up in fear of affecting their moods. The Blue Brook Guild expert party continued forth. The next 2 waves of monsters each had less than 3. With 7 people going against them, it wasn't too difficult. However, while fighting the following wave, Flying Brushstroke was caught off guard by a sealed mountain thief and was sent flying, right into the aggro range of another wave of sealed mountain thieves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The new wave had 5 monsters. After Flying Brushstroke was sent flying, he never came back. The other 6 didn't have time to come over and save him before he died and left the dungeon. These 5, in addition to the original 4, made a total of 9 sealed mountain thieves, 2 more than the first wave. As for Blue Brook Guild, they only had 6 people left. After a furious life and death struggle, the 6 couldn't protect their lives from these 9 thieves. In the chaos, 3 of the 9 thieves were killed and the 6 Blue Brook Guild experts were wiped out. The creme de la creme of Blue Brook Guild's experts managed to explore for a total of 12 minutes in the new dungeon. This record was much better than those parties who were swept upon entering. Next time, they knew that there would be 7 sealed mountain thieves in the first wave and would be prepared for it. The pioneering of a new dungeon was done through the stockpile of these attempts. Unfortunately, Glory's rules were rather harsh. A character would be sent out of the dungeon upon dying, so they would be unable to experience the entire thing. In addition, there was an upper limit to the amount of times you could enter a dungeon per day. Each character only had one run at the 10-person dungeon sealed Mountain Thieves hideout per day. These members of Blue Brook Guild had, of course, used this chance. Just as the Blue Brook Guild's party was wiped out, Yi Shu had already led Happy's party to a victory against the Sixth Wave, far outpacing Blue Brook Guild. They hadn't even had a single casualty yet. This was thanks to Yi Shu's leadership, of course. For example, where the Blue Brook Guild had accidentally pulled 9 sealed Mountain Thieves, Yi Shu had thought of the possibility of these hidden dangers and told everyone to pay close attention. They then managed to avoid such a fatal mistake. The characteristics of sealed Mountain Thieves was something Yi Shu was observing continuously. Whenever he figured something out, he would naturally warn everyone. Their methods became more and more refined, so the battles naturally became smoother and faster. After a while, they finally arrived at the first checkpoint of the Sealed Mountain Thieves hideout, where there would definitely be a boss, Sealed Mountain Vanguard, Brother Wolf. They didn't know if the name was the boss's actual name, or just some sort of title, and they weren't interested in finding out either. The name wouldn't affect the power of the boss, after all. Against a boss they knew nothing about, they had to be extremely cautious. The 10 didn't rush forwards, but instead got a good look at their surrounds from every possible angle to see if there was anything in the environment that might interrupt the flow of their battle. Then, they checked if there was anything special about the terrain and if they could use it to their advantage. Last but not least, they couldn't forget to check out the boss itself. Though they couldn't click into its profile and check its equipment it used like they could with a player, they could still figure out what sort of class it was from looking over its equipment and weapons. In the end, Sealed Mountain Vanguard, Brother Wolf seemed extremely powerful from this point of view. A sword hung from his belt on the left, there was a gun in a holster on the right, and his right hand was clenched around a 2-meter-long spear. Just from the weapons, this guy had crossed 3 major classes, continuing on with the shamelessness that were common among bosses. I doubt he can use magic attacks, Wei Chen commented. Brother Wolf seemed to be a physical fighter. Casting spells while holding a spear was something only players did. NPCs were very loyal to their individual classes, proudly bearing the weapons of their classes. Everyone keep your distance for now and let me test him out first. Ranged characters can provide the appropriate cover, Yi Shu began to order. After looking over the terrain, Wu Chen had long since picked an appropriate point to attack from. For ranged fighters like launchers, there wasn't much of a need for movement in PvE. At most, they just needed a spot where they could get closer and back away when needed, ensuring maximum firepower coverage when the boss was pulled by the other players. Chen Guo naturally knew this as well, but she wasn't nearly as confident as Wu Chen. She was even worried about messing up when fighting normal monsters. Now that they were at a boss, she was even more nervous. Seeing Wu Chen pick a spot, Chen Guo wasn't sure what to do. It was a good thing that Yi Shu's voice rang out, giving her a place to stand and helping her calm down. For Wei Chen, there was no need for Yi Shu to worry about him. Seeing everyone stand in their respective places, Yi Shu had Lord Grimm charge at the boss. Brother Wolf had a wide aggro range, and his reactions were very fast. Just as Lord Grimm stepped into range, Brother Wolf had already partly turned, lifting the spear in his right hand and swinging it despite the distance. Yi Shu saw this clearly and hurriedly rolled. Looking back, he didn't see any hint of an attack. Brother Wolf had already straightened his spear and began to charge over. So that action had been nothing but a feint, and not an attack. This small mistake didn't affect his mood. They were pioneering, after all. This sort of mistake was better than getting killed outright for being reckless. The spear held by Brother Wolf was a total of 2 meters in length. He held it by the base with one hand as he quickly rushed over. As soon as he was in range, the spear was swung down in an arc. This swing wasn't a battle mage technique, and was probably just a normal attack. However, this was a boss's attack, so Yi Shu didn't dare to assume anything. What Yi Shu had Lord Grimm do wasn't the ingenious sidestep and counterattack that he would usually do when peeking, but a direct roll onto the ground, rolling 3 times and dodging by several body units. This sort of dodge seemed extremely exaggerated, like he had been scared witless. However, as the spear hit the ground, everyone realized what a smart move Yi Shu had made. When the boss's spear hit the ground, there was a thunderous sound and an immense shockwave spread from the point of contact. The ground was instantly filled with cracks. If Lord Grimm had just sidestepped it, who knew what would happen to him upon being struck by this shockwave? However, being a punching bag wasn't Yi Shu's style. As soon as the attack missed, he had already raised his myriad manifestation umbrella and sent out 3 anti-tank missiles with a resounding boom. Bosses had better AIs than normal monsters, occasionally using some method of dodging. As the anti-tank missiles approached, Brother Wolf didn't dodge. Instead, he swung his spear and was immediately swallowed by the resulting explosion, having destroyed the missiles. Yet, Lord Grimm had already closed in with a slide kick at this time. Brother Wolf had swung his spear up, so his lower half was left open to attack, resulting in the slide kick meeting its target. If one timed it right, a slide kick could knock down its target, but Brother Wolf wasn't moved by the slide kick. Yi Shu wasn't too surprised. Lord Grimm had already jumped up from the slide kick and separated his myriad manifestation umbrella into 2, setting it against his arms and throwing out a back throw. Under level suppression, even grabs could easily be shrugged off. The current Lord Grimm was unfortunately experiencing such a case. Luckily, Yi Shu's reaction speed was god level. When the skill activated and had no effect on its target, he immediately realized it had been shrugged off and quickly cancelled the skill before retreating. Brother Wolf reaction speed was boss level as well, sending his palm out with a step forward, in the style of the Battle Mage's falling flower palm. This Brother Wolf knew some Battle Mage skills, as expected. Brother Wolf's falling flower palm had a wide range, and it seemed that Lord Grimm wouldn't be able to dodge it. In that moment, a streak of white light fell. It was a pre-prepared heal from Wenyi's little cold hands. Everyone silently praised this move from Wenyi's. Yet, who would have thought that this falling flower palm never managed to strike Lord Grimm? Upon contact, he had realized something was wrong and quickly retreated. This swift reaction of Yi Shu's allowed him to completely dodge Wolf of Season's counterattack. Wenyi's seemingly perfectly timed heal was, strictly speaking, a misjudgment. It was clear that in terms of judgment, Wenyi was currently not at Yi Shu's level. Having dodged, Lord Grimm swerved to Brother Wolf's side to attack. A level 70 character and a level 75 dungeon boss became entangled in a one-on-one fight just like that. If any normal player saw this, they would be surprised enough to eat their mouse. However, everyone in Happy was used to it. Even Chen Guo wasn't worried. After a few exchanges, everyone could tell that even Yi Shu was struggling a little. Little Cold Hands healing had a few chances to shine soon enough. Yet, Yi Shu slowly figured out Brother Wolf through these exchanges, and after observing for a while, Wei Chen and Wu Chen began to provide firepower as support. Chao Yifan's 1-inch ash was no longer where he had been before, but had instead gone to support with his ghost boundaries. Steamed Bun Invasion had also gotten into a brawler's range, holding a brick and moving around in an attempt to get behind Brother Wolf. Finally managing to hit his target, he didn't even have the chance to celebrate before Brother Wolf recovered from his dizziness. Bosses originally had a powerful resistance against status effects. Now, with the addition of this level suppression, what status effects they could manage were far too short to take advantage of. At most, it could only interrupt the boss's attacks. Okay, that's about good. Prepare for battle everyone. Listen carefully to my commands. When I tell you to scatter, retreat in your own directions, at least 4 body units, and be quick about it, Yi Shu ordered. Understood, everyone replied. Tang Ru was impatient to get in on the action, already commanding soft mist to charging, but it was Mo Fan's deception who was even faster. Streaking forwards, a combination of attacks instantly slammed into Brother Wolf.